All right, Tom, welcome to the WealthTech podcast. I am happy to have you on the show today. We're going to be talking about one of the subjects that is really one of the bigger trends that we've seen, the democratization of family offices and how there are a lot more de novo family. The family office start to come back down again. Your perspective of what you're seeing in the marketplace, but would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's been nice getting to know you over the years, and I'm always excited to be on a podcast. So this is my second official podcast appearance. So
You were on the Mac podcast, right?
I was on the Mac podcast
The
earlier in the
great
year.
one.
Yeah,
Brian Adams does a great job. I
he
saw that one.
does.
That was a good one.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah. So well, yeah. Well, but like I said, thanks for having me. So I've been in the space now for about a decade. Actually, most of my career was spent in-house within family offices, both single and multi. And one of my main major roles in those firms was running technology. So I was been on the user side a lot longer than I was on the provider side. I think it's been a fun kind of journey shifting from one side to the other. Obviously, there's been a lot of focus on tech in the marketplace and what it can do for these firms. You're seeing family offices started at a much smaller scale. They have a lot of the same complexities as their bigger counterparts, but they're lacking with resources, lacking with budgets.
Tell me a little bit about some of the common problems that family offices have come to you with, and then also if you could share your perspective if that's kind of shifted over time.
I think the biggest problem for a lot of families, from a technology perspective, is they stay on old systems too long, right? And the one we all know is Excel, right? We've all spent most of our career in Excel. It's kind of our security blanket. But you stay on it too long. And now, I mean, there's to me, and this is what I always encourage most families, like regardless of the software that you pick, get it in the platform, get it organized. That's, that exercise of gathering all your information together. And we work with a lot of families directly who don't have external staff, and the implementation process is always a bit of a needle in a haystack type exercise where they're like, we've got our spreadsheet here, but then we've got Iron Mountain boxes still where we got an email account that's closed down, we can't access anymore, or so it's whereas if you go through the exercise to implement a platform and get off of Excel, because Excel just, if one person built it, 20 years ago, the model, and it's still the same thing you continue to use. And I think it's unfortunate, but the whole, if it's not broken, don't fix it mentality
Yeah.
definitely holds true. But a lot of times they don't realize how broken it is because it hasn't needed to change. It still serves their purpose for what they need it for, but it could be a lot better, right? So, and I know for the families I've worked for, and especially now that I'm on the provider side, I think the best mentality is to adopt, is to always be looking for new software. Even if it's not a full-on evaluation, but like always be aware of what's out in the market, especially nowadays where there's, a new platform appearing every other day. I mean, that's probably a little extreme, but
There are a lot more new entrances, though. You do have to pay attention.
exactly. So and I think that like ourselves, the newer providers are growing quite fast, right? Whether it's features or just the firm itself. So being aware in regards to, hey, maybe so and so is not ready yet for us, but they could be ready in 6 to 12 months, or they could be ready in a year or two. So regardless of whatever platform you pick, make sure it's easy to get your data out of it. So that, because things are happening fast right now, some of these, incumbent players might be outdated in not too distant future.
Yeah, I think those are a lot of good points, Tom. I think, well, first off, Excel, there's studies out there like 90% of Excel spreadsheets have a material error in there. Whether you're copying, formatting the right calculation or not, it's not auditable. Tends to be expert systems based on whoever the person was, and that person leaves, then you have issues. You do see too, I think, a lot of the buying behavior for single family offices in particular. is event based, right? Something happens.
Yeah.
Maybe the Excel spreadsheet becomes corrupt. A person leaves is kind of a key trigger that kind of had all that institutional knowledge in their head. They miss a tax deadline. And instead, if they could be a little bit more proactive about, you know, managing and monitoring their vendors. Hey, is my vendor accumulating a lot of technical debt? I mean, to take a look at things like, is my vendor SOC 2 type 2? Is my vendor have plans to be that soon? What's the AI roadmap? These things are, I think, important that to check in with your vendor on a regular basis. Be a partner with them and provide feedback, but also understand, what their roadmap looks like. Does that roadmap meet my needs? Are they continuing? Because the ownership, these vendors are like stocks, right? They're going up, they're going down, they change ownership. They have momentum in some cases, and in other cases, maybe they don't. So it's always important to keep abreast of what's going on in the market. There's a lot of great resources now. FO Tech, a hub had a great conference.
Yep.
The Family Wealth Report, FinTech Summit. I mean, there's a lot of different conferences out there that you can kind of do a market scan and stay current on the market, which is great. One of the things what I love about having this conversation with you is that you've been on both sides of the fence as an operator and also on the vendor side. Can you talk to me? I know you shared a little bit on with Brian Adams on the Mac podcast, but the role of the chief operating officer, the COO, is so important within a single family office, especially when it comes to technology. Can you talk to me a little bit about that role and why that role is so important?
Yeah, I think it's most important now than ever. I think there's with this new cohort of kind of these smaller family offices that are coming into play, um, there's a lot to be gained from, they're operating at a much smaller scale than a lot of their kind of counterparts. Um, but they continue to be rather inefficient and dysfunctional. Whereas um, that right operator at the helm can really drive kind of the right model in place. I think it's now sometimes there's not always a COO, sometimes it's a combination of a CFO or the CIO. So like whoever wears that hat, if you go back to Excel for a minute, it's not a bad place to start. Doing things manually for a little bit helps you
Yeah,
understand kind of your data flow and your data model. But then, but make sure you have a clear path to exit. So, because I think with AI coming into mix and all this automation, there's a lot of problems that can come because you're not. I mean, I always pride myself with being very aware of our data. Where it comes from, how it's entered. How to rec and check it. When you start when you start applying automation to a lot of that, you lose control, right? So I think th those two things, like maintaining control, but also balancing that with efficiency, are super important for that COO type role. And thankfully, you have no excuses now because you have a lot of tools at your disposal. It's making sure, that you find the right tool. So it's going to be like kind of what I said earlier. It's making sure you have a thorough evaluation process and vendor selection, but always keeping kind of up to date in regards to the market. Talking to your peers. I think traditionally a lot of family offices have been more closed off and have not been collaborative. I mean, you still see the kind of on the investment side of things because they're a little bit more competitive there, but from an operational standpoint, there's a lot to be gained by kind of understanding how other people do it. Especially because, you're kind of at this point, we're kind of rewriting the set of best practices in regards to how to run these firms. And there's a lot that you can learn from bigger firms, but there's a lot that you can't reuse, right? And I think family offices have fallen to the trap before of benchmarking themselves on kind of their, the Dalios and the Dells of the world, which you should not, right? It's not a realistic kind of model to strive for. And it's unfortunate because the industry still kind of continues to kind of not pressure them to do so, but has already set kind of the expectation in regards to what to achieve. I mean, frankly, a family office of 100 million will never be, a multi-billion dollar family office, more than likely, right? Unless something massively changes. And those firms are going to operate very differently. So I think it's being realistic, super important too. There's the person, whoever's in that seat, there's a lot for them to do right now to kind of help structure these firms correctly. Um, at the end of the day, I think what I see a lot is obviously it's important to know, and I think this myself too, but it's important to know what you know, but it's also important to know what you don't know. And
Right.
I see a lot of family offices not knowing what they don't know, and that can get you into trouble later on if you haven't done your diligence and haven't kind of really kind of been thorough in regards to kind of your operational setup.
Yeah, I think those are good points. There's number of peer organizations out there. There's Forge and others. I think single family offices they're not competitive. That peer interaction is really important. I think it is important to recognize that the difference is, and they're not try to compare themselves to somebody that has a much different operational setup and mandate than they have. I know that saying, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. Well, I don't think they're unique snowflakes. There are
Yeah.
um, different bands and kind of subgroups within the family office ecosystem that they can match up against founder's office, embedded family office. There's a number of maybe even family offices that don't even recognize that they're family offices, at least by that label. Let's talk about the democratization of family offices. There's certainly the technology and services are now available that have been able to lower that bar to entry. That bar to entry was creeping up. It was 250 million. It was 500 million. It was starting to get beyond on that. Now you're starting to see that really become lower. There's so many more service providers and vendors that are focusing on the space. What are you seeing in terms of new office creation, and where can these family offices get sideways in their setup?
I talk to firms on a weekly basis who are under 100 million in assets, and some of the more traditionalists in the space will say that's not a family office, and maybe it's not, but like that's not for me to judge or define, right? And I think the definition of family office has changed. It used to be a very specific definition. You had a full team in-house. You had these, you had a if you had a trust structure, you had, an endowment model portfolio, you kind of
Yeah.
checked all these boxes.
Full
Um,
comprehensive. You did tax, you did the financial accounting, you did the investment management of it, you did that endowment
ex
style model, right?
exactly, yeah. So now I think, and this kind of goes back to our conversation about the COO type role, a lot more is being outsourced. And I think because I think I mean this is more of an opinion necessarily, but I think a lot of multifamily offices have failed on it kind of serving wealthy individuals. They seem a lot of them have gone the wealth manager route. They try to get more discretion on the assets, and they fail on the services aspect of things, and they try to scale. Right, a true multifamily office isn't designed to scale, and it's very purpose built. So I think because in an ideal world, if more true multifamily offices existed, maybe you wouldn't see the creation of as many as these new single family offices. But at the end of the day, I think, if a person has the willpower and the need to create this type of structure to kind of hyper personalize their needs, I mean, that's up to them, right? People jumped to a family office like immediately, like, oh, I need a family office because I have this much. It's like you need structure, you need clarity, you need organization. You might not need a full-on family office. Like I heard the other day, I was talking to someone, so it felt like it was like two guys in their garage throwing together 50 million and building out a full team. I'm like, well, that just sounds like it's destined to fail. So I think it's once back to kind of it's having, being realistic about what you're building. But I mean, I would fully encourage someone to, explore that route. I think the key thing is, set your own expectations, your own benchmarks, right? And have some guidelines, some parameters, because I think that's where people go wrong. They kind of just they either they don't personalize it to themselves in regards to, okay, what does this firm need to be? It's back to the point earlier. It's like, well, it needs to be, like so and so's family office because that's what I would aspire to be. It's like, sure, then there's things to learn from that, but I think really the goal is to serve your wealth, right? That's the ultimate goal. Now, if that's because you want to hit a certain benchmark, that's fine, right? But if otherwise it's just to steward the wealth to the next generation, but make sure you have a clear kind of mission behind it. Because otherwise you probably you lose your direction, and then from there it kind of it just kind of you know becomes more dysfunctional and kind of unravels in a way. But I think though the other thing is you need to come well prepared. The more time you spend preparing, the better off you will be. I see a lot of people who are starting family offices who are wholly unprepared. There's a lot of like, hey, I met John the other day, and he has a friend who talked about a family office, and like it was at a party somewhere. Like he must know what he's talking about. Let's go hire him. It's like there's a lot of that. Now trust is important, and hiring the people that you
Trust is
trust is
important.
super
Yeah.
important, but you shouldn't over-index on the trust factor versus the experience because you need to have
Right.
both,
The
right?
expertise. Yeah.
And to me, like you're going to spend more time and money cleaning up someone else's mess who wasn't ready to start it for you than you are going to, if you were to kind of spend a little more time up front to find the right person if you take that route. But having someone, whether it's a COO or a CFO, to kind of quarterback the setup is super important. Someone who knows what they're doing, who knows the vendors, who, can manage relationships. Because that's only gonna, this kind of ends up becoming the backbone you build upon it.
Yeah, I think that staff I mean, trust is important. You need to be that general expert, though, that can be really adept at a number of different areas and categories. I think there are, on the multifamily office front too. I think part of the problem is that the word family office kind of gets used and abused in the market there.
Yeah,
A lot of people will throw that shingle out, and are you necessarily, maybe they like the idea of servicing $100 million client, but are you well suited to be able to handle the complexity that comes with that type of a family? That being said, there are some very good multifamily offices in the industry today,
sure.
and some of those multifamily offices support single family offices as well. And that could be a great way for a single family office to be able to partner with a multifamily office to be able to broaden the services, provide the level of professionalization. Um, you starting a family office. If you're going to start a family office today, walk me through your thinking. You hit the lottery, Tom. All right, you hit the big one. You hit the Powerball. You got the $1 billion. What are you doing?
So
Logging
I
off this
think,
podcast first thing and getting out.
yeah, no, we all have dreams. Of course, it depends on the level of wealth we're at, right? It also depends on the background of the principal, because what you're seeing now is that maybe the principal was a venture founder or whatnot and has some kind of skill set that can be, this is their retirement project effectively. You're seeing a lot of that, right? And that's great because that can offset some of your costs in regards to employment. Um, I'd say probably the first thing to do is either find a good consultant or find that good kind of expert generalist, which you probably need to find a consultant first to help you find the expert generalist, right? Assuming you're literally you're coming from, maybe you worked in, I don't know, a completely different industry. You're not working from finance at all. And you're coming, maybe you're smart, but you still have no idea what you're doing from a financial standpoint and a structural standpoint. Hiring the right person is going to be the first most important step. Because from there, they'll know what to do and can lead you in the right direction. I'm fortunate enough to work with a few good consultants in the space, like Prayer Advisory. I know that team quite well, and kind of they do a lot of that work as a kind of, I mean, their goal as a firm is to kind of come in, help set things up, and then be replaced and eventually kind of go off into the sunset, right? So I think that's those types of firms are great to kind of get started and work with, because they'll set like really setting you on the right path is super important. And if you're set on the wrong path in the beginning, it can create a mess of problems down the line. And then from there, I think it's once again working with the right people to develop the structure that works for you, not for someone else. So maybe there's a trust, maybe there's not. Maybe there's just some accounts at different banks because you don't want to be in alternatives because you don't know how to manage liquidity, right? Like you know, managing your own expectations, managing, to your own abilities and kind of risk tolerances. Because I see a lot of family offices, especially from a portfolio standpoint, over allocate to things they don't understand, because that's what everyone else does, and alternatives plays a big role in that. We're in a kind of a part period in the markets now where you're kind of everyone's scratching their head about liquidity needs, and that could get yourself into a lot of trouble if you've never managed through a liquidity crisis before. Working with the right people, and it kind of setting yourself on the right path that is realistic in regards to kind of what is achievable for your office. So
That's good advice, I think. One is call Brian Adams over at Mac International if you're looking for somebody there.
yeah.
Linda Mack and Brian are some of the best in the business in terms of executive search for family offices. Liquidity is another one. I mean, they definitely family offices can have high exposure to illiquid assets, real estate, capital commitment type of investments, and managing that liquidity is so important that you can get sideways on that really quick, and that's even in good times. Never mind if there is a some sort of financial crisis. Let's talk about buy versus build. I can't believe this question's still out there. The debate's still out there, but I think what's happening with the advent of some of the newer technology nowadays, especially with AI, it's starting to bring up that question again. Talk to me about the realities of building your own solution versus the benefits of kind of going with a vendor provided solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I did a LinkedIn post about this recently. Um, it comes up more often than you'd think. You see it most with some kind of entrepreneurial founder who's very much kind of roll up your sleeves, kind of like, well, if I'll make it happen, I'll make it work, I'll build it myself kind of mentality. And that's fine. Like I think I mean I appreciate that, but I think time and time again has shown now there are obviously some success stories like because I think if you go about building now there's obviously the temptation now because there's a lot more tools at the average person's disposal to help to facilitate building, right? You can whether AI kind of coding tools and whatnot and different applications and interfaces are a lot easier to build out in general, but you're only ever building for kind of what you currently know. I mean, even if you think like, hey, well, in 20 years, I'm going to be investing in these asset classes, there's still other things that you'll never kind of think of that you're going to encounter that could leave you kind of in kind of, a big blind spot in terms of your system. Now, it's funny because I had I'm buddies with Greg Silverman, who's, I don't know if you know Greg, but him
Sure.
and I had this kind of debate. We have a monthly call where we catch up. And now he makes the argument where there is an opportunity to buy if you're kind of more bolting, or sorry, build if you're more bolting on. Like, you have family offices who are running like deep cuts here, but like advent access, right? And they have all their data very well organized there. They're very used to that. Now, obviously, you could argue that that isn't, they're better platforms now, but if it works, it works, and it's a decent data management platform. From there, like, if there's things that you're not getting from a reporting standpoint, maybe you do build on top of that platform because it's a good foundational element for you. But I would not encourage building completely from scratch. But I think it always comes back to you buy, not build. So
The thing with buying is that, or from the vendor side, is that it never ends, right? And that people should understand that it's not that you build the thing and you're done. Like there's really no such thing as that. That there's continuously more demands, more requests, more that you can do, the ability to optimize whatever that solution and product is. And a good vendor's doing that. And good vendor has a roadmap of a good vendor continuously um, automating and updating their system. A good vendor is following the best data security and privacy practices as well. That can be difficult for if you build it to stay on top of. Let's talk about data ag. Good old data aggregation. Still a challenge out there for family offices. There's been so much progress made on that front in terms of eliminating that low value first mile type of activity. What are you seeing in terms of the challenges that family offices have in terms of getting that consolidated, complete view?
so I think a lot of it is expectation setting. I think because this goes back to talked about earlier in terms of automating things but losing control. So now if you do everything manually, you have a lot of control, right? Now that might potentially more error prone. Now, I mean, usually when I think of aggregation, like I kind of section it off kind of two or three ways, right? First is anything kind of coming from your bank or custodians. I think we've seen now that that's better left to the professionals to do yourself than doing yourself in regards to like rather than trying to kind of mine data off of PDF statements, like your bank statements, just, make sure like you find a provider that has the feeds built out. Now some providers are using a plaid type product, which has its limitations, but some of the cheaper solutions, more retail-esque solutions, that's what they leverage. And, if you're cost constrained and you don't mind kind of, I mean, for instance, I use Kubera for my own sake because it's a fun tool just for kind of a personal reporting standpoint. It costs me about 200 bucks a year. It uses Plaid. It's not going to have great performance numbers because it's not picking up transactions. But that's okay. I don't need it to. Like I'm not my tax accountant's not getting this for any kind of, you know,
It's
like
not meant to feed a system that's doing performance
right.
measurement. Let's put
It,
it that way,
it's
right?
it gives me a net worth number, helps me kind of think of allocations a little bit, but also it just store this information over time, right? Whereas if I were to switch different bank providers, you lose all your historical data, right? So that it's a fun tool for me to use. It's not very serious from a family office standpoint in that sense because now if you the next kind of now, if you go up to like data feeds, like true data feeds, kind of like what a Sora does, like an Adapar does, or a Mastro does, and I'm sure others do it too, but those are the ones I know. The direct data feeds, taking raw data from custodians, wrecking, checking that information, right? That's going to get you a lot more detail, a lot more granularity, and it's a lot more robust, right? So I think most family offices need that at a bare minimum from a custodian standpoint. Then if you kind of switch to the offline assets. Obviously, there's a lot big strides have been made, like Arch and Canoe, in terms of alternatives. I think there's a lot to be used, kind of to help with that process. It also helps with your implementation effort too, because you know usually you want to get all your historical data from your
Right.
alts. So and you can leverage those tools to pull historical documents, and that's really helpful. But then if you moved kind of to the even less liquid stuff like sometimes real estate or direct deals. It just knowing that that might never be automated. Now,
But I mean, data aggregation, I did a lot of that problem's been solved and people should be using it. Public brokerage accounts, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of transactions, there's every security is getting a valuation update. There's a lot of providers out there. Either your investment reporting system is doing that as part of their suite, or there are other providers that can be added onto that, as you said, around alternative investments. I mean, that was one of the biggest areas. That was a pervasive problem in the industry that had no solution, that really required a high level person, a CFO, to be able to interrogate these documents. That problem has been greatly solved. I mean, AI has been a huge with that, and then you're seeing vendors really focus on that problem, and some very good vendors in that. So I hope people take a look at trying to automate those aspects of it. The public brokerage accounts from using an institutional custodian that's going to provide a feed versus using a retail type of provider that maybe doesn't provide a data feed is something that firms should think about. I'm at Fidelity. Don't be at Fidelity Retail. Switch it over. Get on the institutional side, and so your provider can get access to a data feed and automate that process. But
what it's funny you say that because we just implemented a system called or a solution called Akoya, if you've come across Akoya. And Akoya, we used to be in-house at Fidelity, and they spun out, and now they provide data feeds for a lot of the retail brokerage accounts. So we used to have to leverage Plaid for that, but we know
yeah,
we found out the data quality from Plaid isn't the greatest, and those feeds tend to break because it'll time out.
credentials change,
Yeah.
those type of things change. Yeah.
Whereas Akoya provides the same level data quality as the institutional feed, but for the retail accounts. So like you can get now finally we can get Fidelity Retail alongside your advisor accounts. So now and the only thing I'll say further about kind of I mean I definitely agree you're better off using like an Arch or a Canoe type solution to aggregate your alt, especially if you have a high volume of them. But know that a lot of these solutions aren't perfect, so don't expect them to be, right? There's still some effort required to get them right. I definitely see, especially with AI now, there's this mentality of people where like, well, it's just magic, I wake up in the morning and my data's just already there. It's like, well, maybe. every other day, but not every day. Like don't like get don't completely let go of control and kind of take hands off the wheel because if something were to break, you won't know how to fix it. And I think back to my point earlier is knowing your data flow, knowing how it all works, knowing what needs to be done is super important and kind of being self-aware. Because I mean, I think we're still far from, especially from a financial data standpoint, everyone fully trusting AI to automate everything. Because I mean, anyone who's used ChatGPT, for instance, I use it quite regularly. It hallucinates. It doesn't give you perfect answers. And I think we're still far from a fully automating everything. So
Yeah, I think that you still need a human in the loop to be able to evaluate that. Maybe you're not putting fingers to keyboard, but there should be some sort of human that's doing the evaluation
exactly,
of the results. AI is getting better and better, but it's not perfect by any means. It is being really good for big data sets, being able to look at anomalies. I know a lot of vendors are using it as part of the reconciliation process behind the scenes to be able to help with that. So, but I still think at the end of the day, people should be reconciling often and should be there should be a human in the loop on that for sure.
absolutely.
Let's take a look at the family office, the future of the family office industry, which is obviously bright. It's a dynamic time in the industry. Where do you see the industry in 5+ years?
I think it's going to look very different. I think we're at a point now where things are changing quite rapidly, whether it's technology, whether it's the firms serving these offices, these people, and then it's the offices themselves. Obviously, this as we've been discussed at length, this new kind of cohort of smaller family offices, whatever you want to call them, um, uh, you know, I think I think what we'll see kind of how the whole democratization trend plays out. I think there'll inevitably be some correction at some point. I think we're not that we're in a bubble necessarily, but we're definitely, definitely in a major growth phase for family offices. And maybe too many are being created. I don't know. But you'll see some trial and error. You'll see some fallout of that. I think you'll see some people try it and say, "Hey, this was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. I'd rather just have hand over the keys to someone else and do it for me, like a family office services firm or a bank." Um, but I think there's going to continue to be, and I don't. There's a major gap in the market of kind of what a wealth management firm can offer versus what the traditional institutions kind of the family office services pick up, right? And I think a lot of people are aware of that, but I don't see like for instance, a bank just to throw a number at the wall, like maybe their family office services start at 300 million and above, right? And then maybe wealth managers designed to serve a person who's 50 million and below. So you have this gap there. So I'll be interested to see kind of how that gap gets filled. I think technology will help a lot because I think that's really what people need most at the end of the day is organizing their data and gaining more clarity and insight. Um, but then from there, it's like I think it's more a matter of kind of personal preference. Like, what additional services do you need? Um, so um, so yeah, I don't know. I think I think we're gonna continue to see a lot of growth, which is great. We're going to see a lot of kind of new structures and trial and error in place. And then I think just purely from a technology standpoint, I'm very bullish on a lot of the newer platforms gaining traction. I think there's a lot to be learned from the mistakes of the incumbents, especially when it comes to serving family offices. So I think there's definitely some room there from a solutions standpoint to offer some very powerful tools to these firms and kind of maybe not dethrone some of the big players, but make a good case that these newer, leaner firms offer a really compelling solution. So we'll have to see kind of how the market, the competitive landscape changes because of that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think family offices ultimately have a data problem. They sit on a huge pile of data that they can't necessarily manage or organize. I think technology will solve that problem, is solving that problem. I think there's lots of providers that are entering into the market that are helping solve that problem, which are great and are purpose built. I think we'll probably see a little bit more of that in terms of more providers entering into the marketplace to solve that problem. It's creating some buying confusion already. I think they'll probably get a little worse. I do think at some point, you'll probably start to see consolidation. I think there's a lot of, zombie kind of vendors out there that need to they'll be cleaned up, the legacy products will eventually, the AI value prop and the AI native capabilities are so great. And the value prop is just going to be so compelling with the firms that are offering AI capabilities on a consolidated data set that it's legacy software and some of these firms that have maybe grew to like 20, 25 and never really grew beyond that there should be some sort of consolidation in the marketplace with that.
There's a lot of those too.
Yeah, there are a surprising number of those, and I think that it's not that the new entrants are, maybe some people will buy each other and there'll be some consolidators on that front, but I do think there's going to be some consolidation and elimination of some of these legacy platforms as well. On Tom, on a personal note, I love to end the podcast with three questions that have nothing to do with wealth tech. We both love the ride bikes.
Yeah.
What's your favorite spot to ride?
Well, I haven't been riding as much as I'd like to right now because of our young children. But usually if I get out for a ride, I live close to a park system in Philadelphia called Wissahickon Creek, and there's some pretty good mountain bike trails there. It's nice because like I probably I don't foresee myself having the time for a 5, 6 hour road ride anymore. So mountain bike's nice. It's fun because you can go out for 2 hours or so, get a good punchy ride. Actually, there's a group ride on Saturday morning. There's a bike shop in Wissahickon Creek called Paper Trail, and the guy who runs his name is Paul. He does a Saturday morning ride, which is great for the dads who want to get out. It's 8 a.m. It starts pretty early. You're done by 10. You
Yeah,
know, not too much guilt from your wife. So yeah, mountain bike trails in Wissahickon Creek is definitely my go-to right now.
I would say that, one of the things that I love about the Boston area is that there's a ton of conservation land all around in the state of Massachusetts, and there's a ton of really great single track outside the greater Boston area that we're fortunate. It's an embarrassment of riches. Best cheesesteak in Philly.
There's a shop close to my house called Delisandro's, which gets pretty good reviews. I actually pass it almost every day, dropping my kids off to school. But my personal favorite in Philadelphia, in the city itself, is called Angelo's. It's pretty famous. They really upped their game in regards to the quality of ingredients they use, and the bread is key. The bread is key.
That's
But
key.
then actually.
And a book you've read recently that you recommend?
So I'm actually not a big book reader and definitely don't have much time for that now.
Yeah,
I'm actually a big podcast listener. So I figured maybe I'll share some podcasts that I listen
that'd
to
be great.
because like I listen to a lot of podcasts when I like walk my dog outside or it allows me to multitask and do other things. So the um the two I've been like swearing by lately, and they're kind of related. And I listen to a lot of like economics podcasts and like macro kind of landscape and geopolitics stuff. So this guy who I've met now, his name's Jacob Shapiro, and he runs his podcast called the Jacob Shapiro Podcast. He's a geopolitical strategist, very, very smart person. So his podcast, his own personal podcast, is phenomenal. He publishes almost weekly, I think now, and it's very timely. And there's a lot going on now in the news, so it's good to keep kind of up to date, especially if you work in the markets. And the last one I always like to mention because I've been listening to it for a very long time is a podcast by a guy named Grant Williams. And Grant Williams has been in the podcasting space and investment research space for a long, long time. And it's one you have to pay for, but it's worth $200 a year. I pay for it because there's no sponsorship, so he handpicks all of his
Yeah.
guests and it's the biggest names in the space. He had Sam Zell on a few times before Sam passed away. He has just big hitters who just it's just once again you're humbled by their knowledge and just the insights that they share. So that's rather than books, those have been podcasts have been my kind of source of knowledge and information in my kind of the recent years. So
Love it. Well, those are great recommendations. Thanks for doing that.
yeah,
Appreciate that. It's been an outstanding conversation, Tom. Thanks so much for being on the Wealth Tech podcast.
likewise. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. So we'll have to do it again.